Hello Richard, thank you for joining us. So perhaps if you could tell us a bit more about yourself and Crimson & Co.
Well, I'm Richard Powell. I'm the Managing Director of Crimson & Co. Crimson is a management consultancy specialising in the end-to-end supply chain. So we focus on procurement, manufacturing, logistics, planning, and importantly, all of the trade-offs in between. And so everything we do is done with a view to the wider end-to-end context. So we deal with boards, we deal on the shop floor, making change stick. And our customers, our clients tend to be well-known international companies, and we help them with setting their supply chain strategy, improving their processes, reducing cost, reducing their exposure to cash, improving effectiveness, responsiveness, and consistency of performance, and generally moving our clients towards the best definition of supply chain excellence for them.
So as someone who's completely across so many different sectors within supply chain, what are you seeing as the current top 3 trends in supply chain logistics?
I think it depends which level we look at that probably. As we tend to look at the end-to-end supply chain, I'd probably say the first thing is making sure that the supply chain is commercially relevant. So at a board level, it needs to be a force for competitive advantage. And that's more than just reducing costs. That's also about faster time to market, reducing working capital. And also there needs to be an acceptance that globally markets are different. So there's a diversity of market needs, and there's a complexity out there in the marketplace which affects global firms. So companies need to find a way of dealing with that. And that brings me probably to the second one, which is segmentation. The segmentation is a possible solution as a way to manage the diversity that is out there in the marketplace successfully and help to reduce risk to businesses and also improve effectiveness. I think the third one is a slightly strange one because it could at first glance seem to be at odds with the second one, which is about ensuring common standards, direction, policy, strategy for global businesses. But actually, if you compare that with the diversity I talked about that drives segmentation, actually that's a way of managing that diversity successfully in a business. So I think if you put those together, the need for a competitive advantage, the diversity out in the marketplace, and finding a successful way to manage that diversity, and one of the answers to that involves common practices.
So,
but one extra point, Dave, if I'm allowed. What common practices doesn't mean is one way of doing things. I think the important thing is it's an understanding in a business of the best way of doing something in a particular set of circumstances, a particular time frame, in a particular marketplace, and making sure there's clarity in a business of what that best way of doing it is. It's not just one way of doing things.
Absolutely. So proponents of segmentation tend to feel it's appropriate to virtually all businesses with a supply chain management component. Would you say that's true?
Not necessarily. It's true in many cases, but I think there's certainly a lot to be said for really focusing on what you're good at and making sure you're excellent at that thing. I think that, in fact, if you look at the complexity out there in the marketplace, if there's a drive for global firms to segment their own supply chains and they're moving into new markets which have their own infrastructure issues or their own cultural issues, the different market perceptions, there's this big move towards faster and faster innovation of products, so getting the products to market faster. How do you do that if you're a big business? Well, you will probably move to some form of segmentation, which will probably in a way to achieve what you need to do in terms of hitting those targets would probably be to outsource some of your operations to subcontract to third parties. If you're doing that, you actually want those third parties to be highly focused on what they're doing and probably not be segmented. You actually want them to have economies of scale in what they're doing so that they can pass the benefits of those economies of scale onto you, who might be taking a more segmented approach. So actually there are some reasons why businesses would not be segmented and would stay highly focused, and there'd be some reasons why other businesses would be segmented.
So what's the one key area that's causing concern in the FMCG or retail sector of the supply chain, and what would your recommendations be for dealing with that concern?
I think there are lots of areas, but probably the biggest one is probably one that's been around for an awful long time, which is to do with the balance of power between FMCG companies and retailers. And this has been going on for 30 plus years. But it's heavily, the power is heavily entrenched at the retailer end at the moment. And there are a lot of reasons for this over the years. I mean, fundamentally, the brand owners are driven by their factories and marketing. Historically, that's what's been driving how they operate in the marketplace. Retailers, on the other hand, have the customer relationship. And there's been a lack of an acceptance, we believe, of the brand owners to understand that actually logistics and customer fulfillment costs tend to outweigh conversion costs in these businesses. So if you couple that with the loss of the direct access to the customer, you can see why the brand owners have lost power in that relationship. Now things can change. If you take Apple and people like that with fantastic product innovation, that's a way of reclaiming some of that balance of power. We've also got clients, that would take an example, a client who makes soap amongst other things, and in developed markets they go through developed retail channels. In underdeveloped markets they go through other channels to market, wholesalers, distributors and so on, where they're actually closer to their customer. So they understand their customer needs more, and also they've got a chance to make more margin. So if you couple that with the internet being another channel to market, you've actually got there a segmentation of distribution channels potentially, which if approached correctly might allow FMCG companies and retailers both to make money out of the marketplace.
Crimson & Co, as you said, we're an end-to-end supply chain consultancy. So do you find there's often a tendency for companies to only look at the links in the supply chain that directly affect and directly attach to their company, with less consideration for the steps further out?
Yes, definitely, and it does vary by company, and it's definitely a good thing to focus on what you're good at and to get that right. I think that if people don't step back and look at the overall value chain, so the part they play in the overall chain of getting the product to market, then potentially they'll miss out on some opportunities, but also miss out on potential threats. So if a manufacturer's customer is going through a segmented approach and is needing to rapidly enter new markets or bring products to market, then they'll probably be turning on and off relationships with potential suppliers. If you're a supplier of them, you need to know what they're doing, which markets they're going to, when they're doing it, what the timeframes are, what your customers want to achieve. And if you're not doing that, you won't be able to respond, and potentially you'd be at a competitive disadvantage. So I think it's all about being able to look around the corner at what's coming, and the successful niche players constantly stand back and say, what's this value chain going to look like over the next 5 years? What are the determinants of success? Where is the margin going to be made? And then they can make their own business plans accordingly.
And one of the big talking points that I hear a lot about as well, people keep mentioning collaboration. First of all, in real terms, what actually is it? And across the extended supply chain, how realistic is it?
I think it's realistic. In fact, I'd say it's essential, particularly the way business globally is going and has gone. I think what people underestimate is the amount of energy it takes to do it effectively. And it's one thing to do a pilot, which works swimmingly well. It's another thing then to scale that up globally, when you've got different systems around the world, different infrastructures, different market requirements, different cultures within your own organisation. So there's a big change management issue. And historically, people have been very poor at doing this. So I think it's essential that collaboration works effectively, particularly, as I've said earlier, about due to the diversity and complexity in the marketplace, the pace of innovation, the pace of bringing products to market. So companies need to find a way of collaborating as the only way, really, they're going to be able to cope with all of that complexity. So it's probably a question of moving towards a plug-and-play system for collaboration. So there'll be some geographies where a business will do it themselves, whatever it might be, and there'll be some geographies where they'll get somebody else to do it. And as the product lifecycle change and the company lifecycle change. They'll want to move in and out of that and turn suppliers on, suppliers off, bring things in-house, do things externally. So business needs to find a way of coping with these collaboration requirements in an effective way.
If I can also just ask, in terms of complexity, a lot of people talk about the emerging markets.
Yeah.
What issues are you finding that come up most commonly when people try and enter that space?
I think this is a conundrum which all global businesses are struggling with, and they approach it in different ways. I think the big danger that befalls companies is to try and do what they do in their home market in emerging markets. It doesn't tend to work. There are huge cultural differences. There are huge infrastructure differences. There are different channels to market that are accepted in those environments. They need to be thought about. I think one of the other key issues is the payment cycle. So you don't get very far down the value chain before you end up funding your customer and your customer ends up funding their customer. So obviously there are cash implications to a business that needs to be thought about before businesses try to enter those markets. But you've also got other issues like that process of funding your customer actually sometimes forces stock to be forced into a supply chain, and it looks like there are nominal sales there at least, but actually it's not true demand at all. This funding issue causes other problems with planning. So I think there are a number of issues that need to be resolved, and quite often the best way to resolve them is to listen to the people at the sharp end. So usually the people in market actually know how to resolve those issues. And too often global companies try and take a central view. So people in an ivory tower in a different country, and they don't really know what's going on in the emerging markets. So it's a question of understanding the issues that are faced and asking people at the sharp end what the solutions might be.
Well, Richard, thank you very much for speaking with us. And of course, if people do want to know more about Crimson & Co, where can they go?
They can go to our website, crimsonandco.com, and otherwise join us at the conference.
And if you do want to be at the conference, you can find out everything you need to know, and of course, as you said, meet with Richard himself at www.logiconeurope.com.